Shaw's a new guy. Let's pick on him.
Why are we picking on me? What am I doing? Thanks. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. I asked for any non-members to be introduced. Mr. Bartel from WEREMSCO. We have somebody with you there?
Yes, just like to introduce Tom Milton. He's in from our Scottsdale office. He's our Director of Government Affairs. So, Tom?
You can start. Oh, all right. Mr. Mahaffel, you have your caretaker here?
Former paramedic Gil, yes it is. With me today is Lee Burns, EMS Bureau Director.
Welcome, Lee. Ms. Burns?
Yes.
I'll offer the floor to you for the open if you have any opening comments. You're eating, right?
Well, that'll speed it up because I'm food driven. I've been visiting WEREMSCO meetings over the past couple of months, mostly because it gets me out of the office, and that's always good for them. As we were sitting out in Buffalo today, I got an email note that we had an unknown light powdery substance delivered to our office. So we're so popular. I wanted to kind of give you the nickel tour of what's going on at the state level that you might not. I know Cheryl's on it, so a lot of it is probably redundant. I'm sure you've heard about the desire to reform Article 30. There's a long history to it. It's painful mostly to me. I really didn't think I'd still be alive after Article 30 was in 2 budget bills. In the last budget, Article 30 wasn't, revision Article 30 was not included. So I thought I had dodged a bullet. And I'm kind of tired of living under my desk. And then the governor's office really wanted to revisit it. And we brought groups of EMS stakeholders from all over the state together to talk with the governor's office about issues having to do with Article 30. And I have to say that it was utterly, to me, one of the most painful experiences in my adult life. Do I have to introduce my colleague, Dr. Young? Perhaps you would recognize him.
That was her first most painful experience.
No. So, in any event, we ended up with 4 stakeholder meetings. So, in the back of your mind, you're wondering what a stakeholder is. And essentially, what I did, because I have this self-preservation instinct that's very strong, we identified EMS constituencies. So, as an example, the United New York Ambulance Network was one onion, the ASAP physicians, the American College of Surgeons, the emergency nurses, volunteer EMS, volunteer fire, volunteer chiefs, fire districts, on and on and on and on. And we notified them of these meetings. And the logic was, my logic, that these organizations, these constituency groups should pick their representation, not that the governor's office or the department should pick who we decide who represents them. So we thought it was oddly reasonable. But, and we had some very good, very, very strong people showed up to represent the MS community, and some very interesting and not very productive people as well, because it's government and they can. And in the first meeting, we had several people, I was horrified, sat there and said, there's nothing wrong with Article 30, change nothing. And you are out there, so you know that that is really not an answer. And it's certainly not the governor's thought process. Article 30, for those of you who are not this old, maybe you are it. Article 30 was this version was initiated, ratified, and enacted in 1992 when Greg had dark hair.
Which grade?
So,
Yeah.
yeah, true. governance. You are, you know, the fact that you're sitting here tonight is part of this whole governmental process by which we tortured, personally, John Adolph endlessly. So, the idea in reforming the public health law, honestly, and this is me telling you this, it's my opinion. So I think that the law needs to be changed for a number of reasons. One is that this current law is government-centric. Whatever we do in the future has to be patient and provider-centric. Has to be concentrated on the patient and the people providing care. And this law is clearly not. The law, it really does need to shift governance. Right now, really the most powerful component of the current public health law is the regional council. And you are burdened with, really frankly, unnecessary decisions. Greg and I had this conversation the other day. He has a vision for you going forward. My vision for the regional councils, quite honestly, is but the state of New York, the citizens and the patients need this body to oversee EMS, to monitor EMS in the region, to ensure that ambulances are going to get to patients, that providers are getting trained, and that the system is stable and healthcare is being provided. And we're at a crisis. And I know none of you can look me in the eye and say, well, everything's just great. Because if you do, I will believe you to be lying to me. And the other part of this whole reform thing is I do not like the underside of my desk much. So putting a change in Article 30 in a budget bill was really horrifying to me. And I really think that the EMS community needs to be involved in it. And so my purpose in traveling about the state is, you know, we'll contact all of the provider groups and we'll get them to represent EMS constituencies. But honestly, it needs to be on your radar scope. It needs to be on your agency's radar scope. It needs to be on your provider's radar scope, because in the end, it will affect them, and it needs to be. We really need positive, constructive feedback in anything that we do. So that's my thing. In terms of what's going on now, about a month ago, I was contacted by a series of highly placed attorneys who have told me we are going to be reforming Article 30, but we're going to be doing it a little bit differently. And can you take a look at this, that, and the other thing? So I need to stress like a hole in my head, but it is not a done, it's not dead. So the fact that it wasn't in the budget bill, that nobody came to consensus with the provider groups, doesn't mean anything. The governor's office is keeping an eye on it, and apparently somebody there wants us to reform Article 30. So if you were to ask me, I know Article 30 probably as well as any of you. It needs to go, we need to replace it. So my hope is to keep the regional councils informed. Right now, initially the idea was to keep four count them, advisory groups to the commissioner. We would like to consolidate them to one or two. We have conflicting desires from the group, whether one is a systems-oriented advisory committee and the other is medical control, medical expertise advisory committee, or a singular advisory committee that is very, very heavily medical. I think that again, this is my opinion. It shall not be necessarily representing that of the governor. But I think for us, we need medical expertise and we need interaction with the medical community going forward more than we need system evaluation, because the system piece of it has to be more regional. So I don't know how, at the risk of Cheryl hunting me down and beating me senseless, I don't know how valuable going forward our state council would be in a consolidated environment. So if it were up to me, a singular council would be more medically driven than system driven. Although, honestly, I do like the idea of a systems strong committee and a physician committee. So right now we have, under EMS, we have the CMAC, the docs, we have the SEMSCO, which is the full council, we have a state trauma advisory committee, which is meeting tomorrow, should you want to get sliced and diced. It's all the trauma surgeons and trauma program coordinators and nurse registrars. It's a very, very vibrant group. And we have an EMS for Children committee, which I'm conflicted. We really need to have a separate committee when what we should have is an integrated physician committee that involves pediatric medicine. So stay tuned. On the brighter side, we're bugging the crap out of the legislature on things like community paramedicine. So before there's a total revision to Article 30, you may see some positive things with regard to enabling community paramedicine. And also, with regard to mutual aid, one of my big things, you all have mutual aid plans. It is not the intention of the state to do anything with, about, or to that. But in reality, what public health law needs to do is provide for or delineate liability coverage to a responding EMS organization that is not so affixed to a fire department. And it also has to delineate a reimbursement schema so that if you respond, you shall be able to get reimbursed. Right now, there's nothing, and it's killing the EMS community, frankly. And as I keep telling my bosses, and they hate me for having to hear it, but right now, when something happens, the EMS community really rallies and is filled with goodwill and goes. And they go without asking or questioning, how are we going to get paid for this one? When in reality, it's not free for you to do mutual aid, and you should not have to incur costs to help your neighbor. So you can't get rich doing it, but you can't get rich doing this anyway. It shouldn't cost you money. So those are big issues, and I'm hoping that they're tackled before this process. The state council, we've kept the state council apprised. And the other thing I want to do, and I know this will break all of your hearts, the CME program is still a demonstration project in the law, and we need to move it to a permanent program. I think that if that happens, we have a little more latitude with some of the things we'd like to grow the program into and reimburse for. So those are my goals. None of them are controversial. Those parts of it. So funding. When I first put my regional council spiel together, we were still working on the budget. And I tell you this, I do balance my checkbook using a program. It's pretty intuitive, Quicken, and it's just not that hard. But then I get to work and they screw with you. So for the last while, and you probably know better than I do, the EMS was allotted under public health law $19.79 million, and it's been probably close to 8 years now that has been a static figure. Nearly $20 million. Here you go. You have to 50% of it goes to training, and the other is what covers the rest of the system. This year, so as the governor's been trying to balance budgets, in the 13-14 budget year, this past budget year that just ended, while we were allocated nearly $19.8 million, we were only given in our little bank accounts $15.6 million. And I could not understand that. Is it a wire transfer? Where'd the money go? Offshore? Could someone explain it to me? And so it took me a while to realize that what they were doing was, if you didn't spend all the money last year, we aren't going to give you any more this year. So we watched the state calls it a cash ceiling. So in the 13-14 budget year, our cash ceiling was 15.6, which really, we could pay our bills on the non-training side, but I was extremely concerned that we're not going to be able to cover the training costs. Because of the bizarre nature of EMS training and the vouchering system, we were able to spread our expenses over a series of fiscal years, which no matter how many times I explain that to the budget people, they don't understand, but it saves us every year. So this year, the budget was approved and allocated us $19.6 million. We we are less about we're less $131,000 exact. And when I compared it to last year's and the 1,000 years before its allocation, it appears that they cut it out of the Bureau's personnel line. They essentially cut a position out. They have assured me that I should not break into a sweat or try and kill anybody. I'm more likely to try and kill anybody than I am sweat about it. But on the flip side, on the brighter side, they've increased our cash ceiling almost $1 million, which I do not understand. Because at the end of the fiscal year, because of the state's complicated contracting and not paying bills thing, we actually, our cash ceiling should have been about $13.2 million, because that's all that we could spend. And I'm not asking. So while we were down $131,000, we're up almost $1 million. I don't care.
How you doing?
Are you aware of the whole College of Trauma verification process? Have you guys been paying any attention to that? You're smiling. Why are you smiling? Okay. In New York State, forever and a day, we have designated trauma centers under a section of regulations called the 708s, which are basically a quality assurance regulation. And we've designated regional trauma centers, regional something, and then community hospitals, regional
Area.
sorry. And the 708 regulations are pretty scary, and they're also very outdated. They're from the mid-90s. They're slightly more modern than Article 30. And even though with the stack, the state of trauma guys, I have to tell you, they duped this out for a painful long time, and a lot of it had to do with the issues going on in their own hospitals. The American College of Surgeons Committee on Trauma has a verification process that's nationally accepted and recognized, and it verifies 4 levels of trauma centers. The level 1 is what we are calling regional trauma centers. Level 2 is really the same as a regional trauma center, except it's not associated necessarily with an educational, like medical school, university situation. So then level 3 is what we really equivalent to our current area trauma center. And a level 4 is, for lack of a better term, and I did not make this up, a trauma station, a rural hospital or a small hospital out. So with the commissioner decided about a year and a half ago, if you're going to be part of the trauma system in New York State, you're going to be verified. And again, we thought, oh my God, the hospitals are going to now try and kill us. Not that the EMS community wouldn't want to kill us. So, but freakishly enough, the hospitals really have stepped it up. We have 2 currently verified trauma centers in New York State, with 2 more on the horizon. We have really some of the smallest hospitals have indicated interest or applied for levels 3 and 4. So in the end, the bigger picture is that while the same hospitals you know as trauma centers will be trauma centers, there will be more availability outside of the regional trauma centers. And it really strengthens the whole trauma system. So it also, we're looking at a lot of good trauma data, and we have a great New York State trauma database or patient registry, and the department has something called SPARKS, which couldn't even tell you what it stands for, but it is a very comprehensive patient registry, and we have PCR data. And SUNY Albany gave us some lovely young fellow people. They're all about 12 when they're doing graduate degrees, and their projects are to start data matching. So stay tuned for that, because that's going to be really cool. So that's the trauma center part. You can look for ECMC is either going to or has had its consultation consultative visit. Women's and Children's has had their consultative visit, did remarkably well, and will probably be turning around and doing the verification, which is also really remarkably interesting and exciting and huge. So the reason I tell you guys this, not the least of which is that you have to bring your trauma patient somewhere, the college really looks at the facility's interaction with the EMS community. I went to the Albany Medical Center consultative visit, and all day long we looked at records, and it was very, as interesting goes, it was interesting to look at records, and I kept looking for ambulance records, not tons of them in their records, but in the electronic records, the electronic submitters, EMS records were in the files, which was encouraging. And then the college held a dinner where all the department heads had to come. And the ED director was asked about EMS, and he did not bring his EMS doc, sadly. And he really, they hammered him. You know, what are you doing? You know, do you provide feedback? Do you provide data? What are your resources? What are you doing for education? And Albany Med has a huge trauma region. It's really 17 or 18 counties. So he left there pretty bruised. Now with that said though, Albany Med does a lot in its trauma region. He just wasn't aware of it. That was, I think, what hurt him the most. So I think as the verification process progresses, the ambulance services and EMS providers should begin to be hearing from the facilities, if you haven't already. Freestanding emergency departments. Off-campus emergency departments. As a result of Hurricane Sandy, to digress for 1 second, the feds, the federal government, and CMS recognizes this concept of a freestanding emergency department, which they define as a facility-owned off-campus emergency, full-service emergency department. Never had we had any in New York State till Hurricane Sandy literally blew through Bellevue Medical Center in New York City. And the people way above me really were forced to consider what to do about this from an emergency services perspective, and we need to be proactive. So Bellevue submitted an incredibly simple and elegant plan to open their emergency department while the rest of the facility was closed, and it was very, very successful actually. They are now, the hospital's open, the ED's moving. It's a huge emergency department. It's bigger than most hospitals. But there are subsequently two more facilities in the city opened these freestanding EDs. So why is this important to do? The group that approves hospital stuff, CONs, just approved 2 freestanding emergency departments in upstate New York. One of them is near you, sort of, Rockport. So Lakeview, the hospital closed. They're going to open as an off-campus emergency department of Strong. And I think we're going to start seeing these all over, mainly because our hospitals are in trouble. They can't stay open. They can't afford to stay open. The communities need emergency services. They need emergency care. So sadly, the answer in many cases are these off-campus emergency facilities.
Just for my clarification, maybe I guess Dr. Young or Jim, was that equipped to the max?
No, the MAC is actually a full hospital. These are essentially an emergency, a standalone emergency department. And Lakeside is going to be a little different. They're going to be accepting not all levels of patients there. So we're going out and going to do an onsite in early July, and we'll go from there.
Would they be reimbursable for?
Yes.
Yes.
They're Article 30 facilities. They're reimbursed at the emergency under the 405. They're full-service emergency departments.
Along that lines, would these freestandings, would they be accepting ambulances, or would they
Yes.
be internal?
Yes.
They just don't admit patients?
Right.
Is that the deal?
And anybody who needs to be admitted my initial reaction was, I was frightened. The possibility of this being very helpful to a community where the hospital is closing is clear. Because the ambulances, you know your patients, even if you don't know them personally, you know who's sick and you know who's not. The freestanding emergency departments really were looking for the low acuity patients. They're not gonna, if you're not taking your trauma patients, stroke patients, cardiac patients to non-centers anyway, it's not gonna change your behavior. But what it will do is it will allow you to stay close to your community and maybe turn around. On the flip side, for me, I don't understand how this happened, but I get to review the plans, and I'm looking for three things actually in the plans. One is the facility needs to provide for interfacility transfers. Calling 911 is not acceptable, and the department will not accept a plan that says, well, if I need to send a patient, I'm going to just dial 911. Because our system is stressed enough, we can't tolerate that. So we are requiring these facilities to have contracts or agreements for interfacility transfers. The other thing is that the facilities need to be involved with and train and work with the EMS community directly, so that you know what their capabilities are. It's not going to be a surprise. No one, when you walk through the door, is going to scream, "What the hell are you doing here?" They do. Yeah, same thing happens to me. So the other thing is that I'm looking for their ability to treat the critically ill or injured patient. And the reason is this. While we believe we are all omnipotent EMS providers, ambulances provide between 30 and 40% of ED patients. And every ED, and the doctors in the back will certainly agree, your worst injuries come in through the sliding doors. And I was teasing the people in the Bronx. I said, where's your resuscitative equipment? And they said, oh no, they're going to bypass us with that. I said, that's all well and good till the gang buddies huck their buddy through the door when he has 3 gunshot wounds in his chest. Then what are you going to do? Oh crap, is what I heard. So the facilities have to be, they have to have all of the resuscitative trauma stuff that a regular ED has. Now, from the ambulance perspective and the patient's perspective, the facility can bill for the emergency services that they're billing for at their main branch. The ambulances are taking you to an emergency department. They can bill for that. For the patient, it's full service, so in concept, the whole rigmarole is there. And keep your eyes peeled on this, and the reason again is that as our hospitals are in a weakened state, and frankly some of them are closing. My colleagues in hospital services and Dr. Young gets a call, well, we're going to be closed on Friday, and it's like Thursday. And the law says you have to provide a closure plan, and the health department has to approve it, blah, 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 blah. We'll see you in 6 months. These facilities don't have 6 months to live. So that's a real big issue.
One of the challenges that we're facing in this area are some of the outlying emergency departments as it stands. It sounds like they're heading in the direction of physician assistants that are operating those facilities. For the freestanding emergency departments, will that
The regs are the same. They have to have a physician.
Okay.
The 405 regs require
The physician.
And
Okay.
and the plans we've looked at in the city and outside all include physicians. Again, it's not the most ideal situation. Would you want your community hospital to live in infamy? Yes, but the economy doesn't support it. And the medical dollars aren't there. So you're familiar with the CMAC's desire to have you all licensed for controlled substances. Love, Jim, if you have questions. We are, I think you may have seen or heard from Mike Taylor, we're pushing electronic medical initially we sent a letter out that said the court has ordered them to close, and then their CEO got all over us. And so we sent out a note saying, oops, I guess the court didn't really order them to close, even though the order said they're closing. And then 2 days later, the CEO of EMS Charts sent a note out saying, you know, we're doing this, that, and the other thing, and we're transitioning our clients. So if you are an EMS Charts user, what I would ask you to do is keep that in the front of your mind, and also start looking at your options for transitioning to another vendor. And there's some, you know, since this all started, there's some really good options out there, and you may be able to save some money doing it. So if you are using EMS Charts, it's a huge pain in the neck.
Lee?
Yeah.
The two primary components affected in that EMS Charts is the CAD piece and then the billing piece. The majority of the people who use EMS Charts in this region do not engage in billing and don't link it in any way to their CAD. So it was my understanding they would probably be unaffected by this, at least in the short term.
All I know is that the EMS Charts people have some sort of what a deal with ESO solutions, which makes me kind of nervous. Again, that's my personal take on it. If they're, you know, I think my response to that would be, I might not really want to go to ESO. I'm going to start looking at my options. And one of the things as services have gone to electronic patient records is, you know, I'm a doodad geek. You know, if it is colored and I can hold it in my hand, I'm happy. You know, I pale in comparison. But I think that a lot of the services have been wooed by, well, I can have a tough book, an iPad, and it's all kinds of cool, and I can talk to it, and I can throw, you know, I can roll my truck over it. I'm hoping that the services have evolved now that they've been using a product to know what they like and dislike, and in moving forward, they can in a more educated way choose a new vendor if that's the direction they want to go. From a state health department perspective, it's entirely up to you. It all integrates with image trends. So, you know, for us, we just don't want. What I'm trying. This is my new motto. You may not like what I have to say, but you'll never turn around and say to me, "Why didn't you tell me?" So that's kind of my mission. That's why I'm standing here. You might not like hearing it, but at least you heard it. Oh well. So the idea is not to catch you by surprise, or not to catch the providers by surprise. So I think other than that, I'm done whining at you. Do you have any questions?
I'm sorry, I dozed off. Is there a question for me? Any questions for Ms. Burns, our director?
Oh, Julie.
I know it.
Is that a hello or?
Yeah, no, there was a hello. Hey, how are you doing? Is there any thought, you know, we know how well
We don't
OGS
think.
does. Yeah, hello. Is there any thought to having like a contract let so that all of these little departments could jump onto a bid for that? You know, because economies of scale. You know, if we all go and talk to the vendor, we're gonna pay the long dollar.
In answer to your question, yes, kind of, no. What we've been working with OGS to get it on a bid specification so that if you can go on to OGS and contract through OGS, that's been very, very difficult because OGS is a lot like the federal government. If they don't need it, they don't want a bid specification. As an example, this will break Jim's heart and all of you county people, particularly him. This year, they're not putting Tahoes on the bid spec because they don't want Tahoes. So you know, you get what they get. That's the problem. It's very communist. So that's one piece of it. The other is that a number of the program agencies have negotiated group deals. That's been really successful. I don't know whether you have.
Well, that was my summer project until this thing blew up.
Keep it on your to-do list.
Yeah.
I know that Donna, Cam, and contiguous neighbors, and which has become contiguous. I would have rather that the program agency do it, but they didn't. So, though, that's what's going on. I mean, I agree. It would be great if somebody would take the lead on it in a local way, because again, the more providers on it, the cheaper the cost. But one of the things that the health department want to do is integrate our data with whatever shiny is. I don't know what that stands for, but it's a statewide.
White Health Information Network.
Thank you. I'm okay with the EMS acronyms, but I cannot, and then the other thing was, there's an all-payer database that our recently former past commissioner initiated. They'd like to involve EMS data with that. And from our perspective, the more use of our data gets, the more information we get back. And the whole Sparks match thing, to me, is, and I'd say I'm not your average idiot. I am an above average idiot. But I think that knowing the Sparks data basically starts at the emergency department door and then goes through the whole healthcare system to death or discharge. It would be great to take the EMS data and attach it at least to the emergency department data so that we knew your paramedics recognized cardiac-related chest pain. We know that, our EMS providers are working diagnoses are accurate. And we know that anecdotally because we don't have a lot of patients that we're killing. And we know that at a local level because you're doing QI, but we don't actually have data to say to the CMAC, you might want to get rid of the widget protocol. So I think that being able to use the information from what you guys are doing in the field is really critical. And there's also the whole syndromic surveillance thing, which would be very interesting and exciting. It's all about, frankly, it's about provider and patient safety. Your eyes are still open, I'm impressed.
Anything else for the director?
Yeah, I know, past budget or whatever, Article 30, you mentioned, or CON reform was mentioned, is there anything going on there?
I can only hope.
Okay, well, we'll just leave it there.
When you look at the law, which you live this, so you have, the CON process rests entirely on the regional councils. And I think there needs to be a more streamlined process for evaluating applications for new or expanded service. The other thing about that, quite honestly, is that the definition of need is probably the biggest issue. If you were to throw a dart on the map in New York State, it would be hard to find a place that does not have ambulance coverage. But the reality of it is there may be an ambulance in East Elbow, but they're not able to get out. And we really have to look at redefining need, which is very, very hard and political and, self-centered and all that kind of stuff. We don't want the evil rural metros to come and eat us alive, right? It's all about the commercial ambulance service trying to put us out of business. So, I think when the councils are forced to evaluate need, it's very, very difficult, not because you aren't all marvelous people, but the way that the law has structured the regional councils, you can't make an objective decision. You can't, because each and every one of you has a personal bend and you're affected by it, and your objectivity is shot, no matter how intellectual and involved you are. And every time council considers a new application, we realize that the system's broken.
Thanks so much, appreciate you coming out here and stopping by.
Oh, certainly.
All right, before we go on here, let's recognize two new members, Tim Shaw. There you go. Tell us about yourself, buddy.
Stan.
Let's swear you in.
Please help me. My name's Tim Shaw, I'm the Park Man 14 years. I'm now currently employed with Orchard Park EMS, also Monroe EMS out of Wyoming County. I run with them. I also have been back with Stricksville Fire Department for 11 years, and currently I'm also running with the Holland Volunteer Department as one of their paramedics. I served over there for about 8 years. So I also teach for the state on this fire side.
They go to the home address, or you
My vehicle.
Like Swan Lodge.
welcome here. And also another new one, Sue Rojak.
I have nothing to say compared to some.
Huh?
I'm Sue Rogecki. I'm a very big volunteer EMT and
Stand.
Spin around 3 times. Sit down.
I have nothing to say compared to Tim anyway. I'm an EMT at Marysburg Fire Department, and that's about it.
Sue and I work together a lot.
Yes, we like to dine with each other. As
Yes.
We'll stop there. Welcome. All right. Dr. Young, you came in. Did you have anything you want to address the group before we go? Great. And Dr. Bill here snuck in the back, but he did get his 2 chicken wings. So it's on the record. Approval of the March 5th, 2014 minutes. They were distributed by email.
I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion. Second, anything on the question?
There's one correction to the minutes, and that is under the treasurer's report. The secretary had a typo, and it should, the spreadsheet, quarterly spreadsheet, we have spent a little over 24,000, not of, so there's a grammatical.
Okay.
Just one, in the minutes, it lists the next state council meetings is January, it should be June.
Where is that put?
On page 3, second item from the top.
Any other corrections, additions, deletions? All right, the motion will include the changes.
Yes.
Anything else on the question? All in favor? Any nays? Correspondence.
They've been distributed. You can read through them. The 3 things that I would like to draw your attention to are the enforcement notifications. 3 of them, enforcement notification on New Allah, 1604229 violation in New York State, Part 816G, suspended for 1 year, effective 2/24/14. Suspension was stayed. He was assessed a civil penalty of $2,000. Second enforcement notification was Stony Point Ambulance Corps, violation of Public Health Law 3012, subsection 1B, assessed a civil penalty of $2,000. Enforcement notification, Victor Carr, number 207855, of Eaton, New York, violation of New York State Part 800.15 subsection A, 800.15 subsection B, suspended through 11/30 of 14.
Okay, and my mistake, I failed to mention, we do have a quorum, 21 of 26. Any questions on the correspondence? Treasurer's report. Report was distributed. We have a motion to accept. We have a second. Anything on the question? All in favor? All opposed? Medical Advisory Committee. I think we lost some talk there. All right, we'll come back to that. Pre-Hospital Advisory Committee, there's really nothing to report, just to note that the Pre-Hospital Advisory Committee is a committee that's kind of a subcommittee of the REMAC, and it's more task-driven. There's been no recent tasks given to it, so there's really been no cause for meetings. Any questions about pre-hospital advisory? State Council,
Nothing new to report. Next meeting is in June.
next meeting is in June. Thank you so much. Any questions on the State Council? Erie County, Mr. Adolph.
Summer EMT class will start the latter part of the month, I believe the 21st. The National Disaster Medical System, NDMS exercise July 12th. Interestingly interestingly enough, earlier this year, we were told we had been removed from the NDMS list, and apparently we're back on. The football is down in front of us again. Lucy's put the football down, and FCC gave us 3 of the 8 site licenses for the new MERS system and UHF, and failed to approve the other 5. We're having our third on-air test tomorrow. We have our fingers crossed. Interestingly enough, Canada has not objected to the repeater installations. They're objecting to the use of the low power input in the region. So we expect that to have a favorable result tomorrow, but stand by. This is our 3rd time around for 3 times. They pull the football out again. And that's it for the county.
Okay. Well, okay. It's all good. West New York strategy.
I have the report all included in the minutes. For April, there were 29 people trained, and there were no debriefings for the month of April. March, there were 33 people trained, 7, 9, 11 debriefings.
Oh, that's 2 debriefings, Chris. 2
Uh,
debriefings, they list the number of agencies and the number of personnel.
Gotcha, 2 debriefings. I like it. So I'll include that in the report.
And the two classes, pre-incident training. I don't think that was circulated, but I did send it to you. I think that's it.
There's 2 trainings, May 16th and May 17th, Advanced Group Crisis Intervention, and June 20th and June 21st, Suicide Prevention, Intervention, and Postvention.
Any information that you want to know on those opportunities, we'll have some information up there. It's for a cost of $75 for each program. For the committee reports, membership.
We currently have a full roster, 13 from Erie County with 2 alternates, 13 from Wyoming with 2 alternates. I will be working with Chris, updating the attendance records, because there are some people that have been failing to attend the meetings or be excused, and as people are coming up for new applications, we're gonna have to move some people out.
Can you forward a copy of the sign sheet so you can also, is there any recommendation for the slackers?
Recommendation, I will review those with you, and we will probably ask them to remove themselves.
All right, so we'll make the communication to those people, checking on their intentions and giving them an opportunity to correct it and create their best wishes. CON, list 8 off. Oh, sorry, is there anything for membership? List 8 off.
There are 3 things. The first 2 are simple. They're not actionable as of yet. Strykersville is working on their expansion of territory to clarify their operating territory. Had a meeting Friday with a member of the Collins Fire Department. When the state asked for people to update their information, the company failed to respond. Their agency code was deactivated. They now realize the error of their ways, and they're in the process of filing a traditional BLSFR application. They thought that it would come before this body this week. It's not ready for prime time. So I met with their EMS officer the other day, spoken to Cindy and Jim. When they have something that's close, we'll have a sit down and we'll convene the CON committee. So that that's realistic that could come up next meeting. I won't be here for the next meeting, but I hope we would have that organized well before that. Just put it on the agenda. And the last item my oversight, when we did the rural metro transfer of ownership at the last meeting, we should have had a stenographer. My intent was to go back and pull it off of the webcast, and the webcast failed to record. So we do not have stenographic records of that. There really was no discussion. There was a roll call vote taken, it's recorded in the minutes, but we will not have a stenographic record for that. Is there anything that we need to do to close that loop, or if you could maybe just make that inquiry and let us know? Council's contract calls for stenographic record policy, that was my oversight. So when we weren't prepared, I was gonna go back and do that other option. So I guess I'm just asking, is there some way we can close that loop? There really was nothing discussed other than the formal action.
Is the webcam working tonight? I mean, I don't want you to re-vote it, but if you have the vote, you can announce it on the webcast and then it's recorded. Otherwise, you can do it at the next meeting.
Oh, it's not redo it, or just-
No.
because it
Oh, I already did.
read the action.
Read the action and you read the roll call vote.
So that's for,
So could we, I suggest that the chair have the secretary read that portion of the minutes into the record for tonight. No, I believe we complied with the provision. Convene the committee first, brought forward an action.
I'm not
There was
challenging.
nothing, right.
I'm
but
just talking
saying.
about memorializing it on the record.
It came from Data, right, John? They don't copy the stenographic report.
It's required.
You know
by
what,
the
I should have known that. I completely forgot about it, because I knew I didn't anticipate any, any real discussion.
Doesn't it just happen at the last council meeting that there was a stenographic?
No, the,
Susquehanna.
Susquehanna?
They had the exact same thing happen
Thank
with
you,
their
yeah,
webcast.
that's
all right, at the recommendation, we'll have the, Chris read in to the minutes of last meeting.
Excuse me, from the minutes for March 5th, 2014, motion 15-5 was made that the CON committee adopts the findings of the New York State Bureau of EMS investigation and review of fitness and competency as described in Article 30A 3005 subsection 8 of the Public Health Law. A roll call vote was taken. Adolph, yes. Ballister, yes. Barber, yes. Billetier, yes. Brunner, yes. Fisher, yes. Gardner, yes. Glass, yes. Hadich, yes. Mayor, yes. McCartan, yes. Roger, yes. Santoro, yes. Smith, abstain. Staffel, yes. Stryker, yes. Sapanic, yes. Neil Williams, yes. Zemrak, abstain. Motion was passed.
Okay, turn back in. Train it, Mr. Jenrick.
Course applications were received and filed. We also received a completed course sponsorship renewal application from Erie County EMS, and all looks to be in order at this time, and I would make a motion that we support Erie County EMS's course sponsor renewal application.
Motion to approve?
All right, anything on the question? All in favor? Any nay? Okay. Anything else, Mr. Zimmer?
That's it.
Bylaws, Mr. Glass.
Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Currently investigating a proposal that was brought up before, so I'm going to revisit that. Deals with attendance by phone. Looking into the legality of it. If someone calls in, are they considered in attendance? So I'm going to need to pursue that with the, oh, I love this, with the council's council.
Okay.
And one other thing, but that'll come under new business.
Okay. Anything for bylaws? Awards, me. Because we did lose a meeting, I went ahead and with the help of Mr. Zemrak, we've created our spot, J.P. Fitzgerald, on Clark Street in Hamburg. It's in Erie County this year. The date will be July 17th.
16. Wednesday is the 16th.
Typo, I'm sorry.
All right, you passed. Dave? Wow.
She's retired, she's
We'll
getting
wait to be
That's right, thank you, Scott.
We'll wait to be recognized from the chair next time, thank you. Is there anything else I wanted to say? With the help of Erie County and the Office of Pre-Hospital Care, the request for applications have been sent out. We've had a bit of a return, actually better than previous years so far. We're ahead. Doesn't mean no. Is there anything we do in Wyoming County to get the word out a little more? Okay. But that's the date. Just so you know, 16th, Wednesday, J.P. Fitzgerald. If you need directions, he goes there 3 times a week. He's got a little stool with his name on it.
Walk there for more.
Yeah, he gets there. Program agency. Just keep on moving.
Report was distributed. It's been a very, very active couple of months, as most of you know, because you've probably seen me more than you really care to in the recent last few months. The REMAC preceptor course is wrapping up, and we started with our first session on March 8th, and we completed a total of 10 preceptor programs. In total, from the Wyoming-Erie region, we trained 219 providers as preceptors. That number is just slightly misleading because that only represents the Wyoming-Erie providers. There were a number of providers who attended from outside the Wyoming-Erie region into our program, probably another 30 to 40 on top of that. I don't know exactly, but I can tell you ballpark it was about that. And of course, as soon as we finished up our last program, I can tell you at least a dozen requests from agencies asking to have another preceptor course offered at their own location. Right now, we are in the process of finalizing medical director approval for everyone who's taken the program. The intent moving forward is that we would offer this program probably twice a year at least. So we would do one in the fall, one in the spring. It's a little bit dependent on what the need is. Once we get done with this approval process, if we discover that there's huge gaps where there's just agencies that have a lot of providers, they don't have preceptors, the word didn't get out, I get it. I totally get it. I'm not trying to not be accommodating for those requests, but in the same sense, we did have these programs announced for a very long time, and I just want to make sure that we complete the first round of tasks before we start adding more programs and really determine what the need is before we do that. I'm sometimes reluctant to do programs in the summer just because they're not generally well attended, but hey, I'm good with it. It's a good night for a motorcycle ride as far as I'm concerned. So, our conference, the 2014 Greater Buffalo EMS Conference, for those of you who had the opportunity to go, I can tell you, for those who weren't there, you really missed a great time. Steve Berry was one of our presenters, as well as John Belinsky, who was at the program last year, and everyone requested him to come back. And then our own local physician, Joe Bart, who was a former paramedic in a prior life, worked for Rural Metro, and also was a certified athletic trainer, did a thing on sports injuries and EMS integration with athletic trainers. So it was very well received. I can tell you that what I was probably most impressed with was the fact that a lot of people really took the time to not just check the boxes on the evaluation forms, they wrote comments that were just exceptionally flattering, I think is probably the word to use. They really, the feedback was phenomenal. We're looking forward to next year. We do have tentative dates in mind, and we don't believe it's gonna fall on the same weekend. We think we're gonna do it a week or two earlier. I'll know within the next 2 weeks and get that out to everyone. Our OPC website has launched the revised version of it. It launched on last Friday. So if you're going through and you discover there's something missing or you can't find it, please let me know. We continue to try to work through just some of the glitches you could expect as we roll that thing out. The next thing is the email listserv. Many of you are getting the emails from my personal email at ECMC. We have a lot of issues with getting emails outside of the hospital, especially if there's attachments, just because of software scanned for confidential information and all that stuff. You should probably expect within the next day or two to get an email that's going to request you to verify your email address. This new system that we're moving to is actually quite intelligent. We can send things to, we can be very specific with the places where we send information. We can do it by medical director, by agency level of care, by REMAC preceptor. We can really break it out that way. And we also know if you open it up and you read it. So we get the return back on it to tell us what the connection is. And so we know how, it's kind of like Facebook. You know how many views you get on the thing. Speaking of the social media aspect of it, everything's going to happen simultaneously. When we send these announcements out, your phone is going to completely explode because your email is going to go off, your Facebook account is going to start shaking, and then your Twitters are going to start tweeting. So it's all going to happen all at once, and we're really fortunate. We've struggled for a long time to try to make this transition, but just through a fluke, there's an EMS provider who, her and her husband, she's actually the one that did the council's website, but her and her husband are both like decoys on all this whole thing, and they embraced this. I didn't have to spell EMT for them. They knew what it was, and they knew what we were looking for and how to get us where we need to get to.
What the sheriff didn't get in trouble for?
I don't know. Lots of training going on. Intranasal Narcan's out there. It's on the REMAC website. You don't have to have a CLI or a CIC present that information. You can have a provider maybe who's taken the training, or if you have an advanced provider in your agency, they can use the Narcan PowerPoint that's on the REMAC website, or there's a link in the policy from the Bureau that will take you to the video that Dr. Daly put together. That's, I think, all of 24 minutes long. Pop some popcorn and get on with life. The National Standards Transition Program that we're putting together, there are some things in life that I'm sorry for. This is one of them that I stuck my neck out on this one. Because there's just a lot of confusion. We really did this to try to be helpful to people within the region, and the return has been good so far. We have 138 providers signed up for 4 programs, and the registrations continue to roll in. The only thing I would suggest on this is that the CME program creates a little bit of a unique situation. If you're taking traditional courses, refresher courses, it's really easy to know if you've gotten the new stuff. It goes by your test date. It's very easy to backtrack it and figure it out. CME research, it's a totally different animal because there's a good chance that the programs have only had this information incorporated into their program for probably the last 14 to 18 months, somewhere in that neighborhood. What I would suggest, and what the advice has been to everyone, you need to have contact with whoever the CIC is who's overseeing the core portion of your CME research program to find out how much of the information you've had and if you have all of it. They should be able to tell that information to you. If there is any doubt in your mind, the requirement is that you be certified to the new standards, having that information by this June 30th. We really wanted to get this out a year ago. The unfortunate part was we just couldn't really get it together with an instructor sooner. So yes, we're under the wire. But if there's a doubt, here's the benefit. If you're doing the CME program, you think you might have it, but you're not really sure. If you can manage to give up 8 hours of your life and come take this training, you can always use this as additional training within your CME research packet, or if you've completed your research, your cycle, you can apply it then, to this one that's coming up. So just keep that in mind. I think if there's any doubt, err on the side of caution with that. But again, the requirement is that by June 30th that you have this information. Are there specific questions on that? They got it?
We're okay.
All right, good. We do have an item that's going to come up for the council for action with regard to REMAC representation changes for hospitals. It was already mentioned that the March Regional Council meeting did not webcast. That was entirely my fault, and I believe a bit of karma, because I was just commiserating with my colleague from the Susquehanna region at the last state council meeting, when in his region he was unable to get a webcast, and I think it was just a little bit of karma. I might have laughed at him. So I do apologize. It was my error, and we know how to fix it in the future. So a bunch of notices have gone out. We do have a total of 8 agencies that haven't submitted PCRs for the first quarter of 2014. I can tell you Blossom Fire Company is probably a year and a quarter into not submitting PCRs. And we've had multiple conversations with that agency, and they're sort of failing to get the completion. We're going to follow up again with them and just keep trying. The next REMAC meeting is on Wednesday, May 21st. It's going to be at Olean General Hospital, and that's a little bit different. It's normally in Erie County at the Operations Center, and this month it's going to be at Olean. The June meeting is going to be in the Big Lakes region, somewhere. The location has not yet been determined. One last item, and this represents the last half of the back page of my report. As a part of this REMAC preceptor thing, remember we're allowing CLIs and CICs to be excused from the REMAC preceptor course, but they, of course, still have to be approved by the medical director to check off skills. But in the process, each year I usually request from the Bureau a list of all the CLIs and CICs within our region, just to kind of take a look at it. What I did is I actually took this information, used it for the REMAC, and then I broke it down a little bit further and gave a little snapshot of our CLIs and CICs in both Erie and Wyoming County. You may know, you may not, but CICs are not required to be in continuous practice. They don't have to be actually in an EMS agency providing care to get renewed. They need it for initial certification, but they don't need it for subsequent renewals. CLIs, it's not the case. They need to maintain that agency affiliation. But when we look at this in Erie County, we have 43 CICs, of which 26 are active and 17 are inactive, and I've broken them down. And I will tell you where I got this from is all the providers have to have a provider privilege application on file with us, and that was one of the things we all went through. So for those CLIs and CICs for whom we did not have a provider privilege application, that's how I determined that they were inactive. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it was a starting point just to kind of give us an idea of where we're at. And so, I don't know, it might be useless information, but that's the kind of stuff that excites me, so I did it. Any questions?
I'm going to be asking you to schedule an IC and CLI class for the end of the year, probably October, November. Okay. We'll be touch with that. So bring that to your folks. Do you want to step right into this part of that?
Yeah. So for the REMAC, the Regional Council has a responsibility to approve the physicians who represent hospitals. Most hospitals have one representative. In one case for ECMC, there is an alternate. Veterans Hospital and ECMC have both submitted letters requesting the representatives be changed. And the current representation, we'll start off with the VA, is Dr. Newman, who is no longer and has not been affiliated with that hospital in the recent past. And so the request from VA is that Dr. Clemency be appointed as the hospital representative with Dr. McGee as the alternate for the VA. And then the second change is for the Erie County Medical Center. Dr. Clemency is currently the representative and Dr. Bart is the alternate. And what they're requesting is that those just flip, that Dr. Bart be the representative and Dr. Clemency be the alternate.
All right. Do we have any objection to voting on
Currently, the regional council representative is Greg, the first at large is Dr. Myers, and the second at large is Dr. Teuscher. Myers did not renew his position within the council, but it is my understanding, correct me if you have a different one, but that you do not have to be a member of the council to be an at-large position for that council.
Right. It's we have 2 seats at large, but it did not require they be members.
That's my understanding, yeah.
Okay, I thought Dr. Clemency was one of our appointments from that.
Yeah, Jeff was under the same impression too. He was texting me on it.
Mr. Sharp?
Very good question. If Dr. Clements is gonna be the alternate for the county, and also be the main one for the VA, if he goes to a meeting representing both facilities, is that a conflict of any type, or just asking?
That's a conflict you're gonna have to deal with.
Okay, I mean, I'm just asking.
It's really kind of moot. They still only have 1 vote.
One vote,
If
Okay.
they represent.
even though there's 2, you represent 4.
Okay, I just,
Anything else on the question? Just before we vote on it, just make the note that it was sent this morning at 1:28, and you still put it on the agenda. And the REMAC has a requirement of 2 weeks prior to, decide that stuff, not going up because it wasn't in within 2 weeks.
That was the prior leadership that was waived, but duly noted.
So, all in favor? Any opposed? Excellent. Thank you, I would have done. But it would be calling everybody on the way home. Hey. Where are we? You're always a showstopper. There's no programming, security committee meeting that I know of. So we'll schedule one for the, prior to the next meeting. What's not gonna be?
I will not be with you next. But it's just that week. I can meet prior if somebody wants to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Old business, Mr. Mahako? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to business happen. Any old business that we have out there? New business? New business. I'd like, what?
What, go ahead.
I'd like to,
They're just talking about your employment status at Orchard Park events, that's all. That you don't have a card no longer.
You can drive.
Anyway. I'd like to bring up the fact that moving this meeting to starting at 6 p.m. instead of at 7 p.m. All right, it seems that in the couple of people I've talked to, there's a lingering kind of, you get out of work and you kind of mosey around, you kind of kill some time, and then you come out here. And then I'm sure going home to Wyoming County is no fun with it. Well, you probably do some dark and beers and things like that. Right? But it would get us out here a little bit earlier. I know that the committees are assigned to meet prior to that. You'd have to adjust. I've been watching the committees, and there aren't too much in the way of committee activities prior to this meeting. It's more of a social thing, and then even eating would be even better, because I get better eat earlier than I probably did anytime. So I'm just throwing it out there for discussion. Is anybody vehemently opposed to changing the meeting? I checked with the bylaws. There's nothing in the bylaws stating the time that we're going to meet. We'd have to probably make, and maybe the health department can help me, we'd have to make a public notice of a change in the meeting time. But that wouldn't be a problem. Any comments on it? First meeting would be tomorrow, right? Well, the dinner meeting is normally 6 p.m. anyway. Except for motion, if there's one out there. I thought you guys were looking at me. Just, you know,
I'm not gonna say anything.
You really don't need a motion. I mean, it's not a procedural thing, it's not a policy, it's just, you just
well,
change
I like it on the record.
You're the chair, you
I'd
call
have
a meeting,
to
right?
tell me that. That's what.
I'd like to make a motion.
Motion?
Switch to 6. I'd be open for discussion. I mean, if it was 6:30, it was more convenient for the bulk.
Okay, so we have a second, so on discussion. Any discussion, is everybody okay with 6 p.m.? We'll try that for a while, see what happens. All right,
should have raised this during the stress report, but, you know, we do things to send people to regional council or not regional council, to state council, or vital signs and things like that. There aren't too many people in the room that really understand, but the Western New York Stress Reduction Program actually sort of started in this organization. The foundation came from here. So, you know, I think one of the things that might behoove us and might actually strengthen their organization is if we offered at least the membership here to go to some of those courses, use some of the money we have, and offer the membership to attend like we do for vital signs. And maybe their programs are well attended, so it's not like we're looking for bodies just to fill the seats, because they run all the time. I've never seen one of these in the last 5 or 6 years get canceled for lack of attendance, but you might find people within this body who want to support that, and maybe we could support them by funding the tuition. And then maybe people become interested in joining the program, maybe becoming a peer counselor. On the other end, strengthen their numbers as well. I don't know if we have actually too many folks left from Wyoming proper that are still active. And
I haven't been on a call in probably a year and a half.
He's stressing me out for this.
Yeah, you're part of the stress.
The advanced group intervention requires a requisite of group crisis intervention. Does anybody have group crisis intervention?
the whole point is it's a two-part program. You go to one, follow with the.
Well, I'm saying if nobody has group crisis, we won't have to worry about the advanced.
Well, I mean, I took both of them, but that was like 15 years ago.
There's a whole new set.
If you don't take the first one, you'll have no concept of what's being talked about, discussed.
Well, this is prerequisite, so that's right. So there's, the one is May 16th, that's the group crisis. Again, it's $75 a person. It's a 2-day course, and then it's lunch both times. And as a person who's down the hall, and his office is down the hall from where they serve lunch, they did it during Lent. I'm going out. Okay?
Yes, it's Greg's turn. We don't have to worry about leftovers being put in the refrigerator.
And the other one is June 20th, so, did you make the motion, or?
I'd make the motion to support the tuition for any member of this body who wanted to attend.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'm not, you know, it might be a good thing going forward. We should probably do it on a case-by-case.
Have them submit one of those applications for funding?
Right, the individual would have to submit the traditional, but we could go on the record supporting that tuition, so it could move forward, because we won't meet, you know, both of these classes will be over before the next meeting.
Okay, Mr. Shore, you second?
Yes, sir.
Any further discussion? Neil, do we have the money? Not hearing no. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So, I'm sure it's going to work fine. More new business. Eventually I forgot, but I do remember I'm supposed to sign committee assignments. So I have them up here for you. I tried to be thoughtful in what I did, so as not to overburden anybody. If you're chair, you don't not know you're chair because it says chair. All right? And Chairman Week, so feel free to come on up and make that ready.
And the memorial is when, Lee?
It's the 20th. This year, we're putting 12 FIDME line of duty deaf people from illness related to their response to the World Trade Center. So if you could, if you've never come out, please do, because it's an awesome ceremony, and I need stress reduction during, before, and after it. So it's May 20th at 11 a.m. on the Empire State Plaza. Follow the Halco out there.
I'm sorry, were the illnesses